Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our September 14th work session. Up first, we have a recommendation for administrative change for the Pep Project Restore applicants. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much. So on September 8th, the state's Project Restore program officially went live for applicants to submit through their portal. We wanted to try and get ahead of things a little bit in anticipation for any applicant who might be looking to use the existing PEP rent relief alongside the state's Project Restore if they are eligible for it. And by getting ahead of it, we are looking to try and utilize the Project Restore funding before our own PEP funds, so we can try to make the best use of all funds, whether it's the state or our own city funds. The way that our own PEP rent relief works currently is that businesses have two options. Option one would be 50% of monthly rent for 24 months, whereas option two would be a 50%, 35%, and 15% monthly rent relief over a 3-year period. Under two potential alternatives we are looking at is a difference between fully utilizing PEP rent relief first and then kicking in for, sorry, let me back up a little bit. Under alternative A, we would provide PEP benefits for the first year of the state Project Restore funding. Months 1 through 12 will be the paid by the state's Project Restore, and months 13 through 24 will be paid by the city PEP program. Essentially, it'd still be that 2 years of the rental relief, but the city itself would only contribute for months 13 through 24. And then the option two that they would be able to choose from instead, such as we had previously, months 1 through 12 will be the Project Restore funds, months 13 through 24 would be the 35%, and months 25 through 36 would be 15% monthly rent relief. Essentially would have the city not paying our first year of PEP, whereas Project Restore would take over that instead. But business applicants would still only require a traditional 4-year lease. The alternative B would be to provide full PEP benefits in addition to and following the first year of the state's Project Restore grant. So under that, option one, for example, months 1 through 12 will be the Project Restore, and then months 13 through 36 would be the 50% of monthly rent that would be provided by our own PEP relief program. Just kicking things out an additional year of rental relief that the applicants would be able to receive. The other option two under that alternative would be a 48-month timeline. For months 1 through 12, will be paid by the state's Project Restore. Months 13 through 24 will be the 50%, 25 through 36 would be the 35%, and then months 37 through 48 would be the 15% of the monthly rental relief. But we would try to look at requiring a 5-year lease instead of a traditional 4-year lease for them to gain that extra year of funding.
Have you spoken with any of the landlords to see if one of these looks more appealing or is more helpful?
We have not yet broached the subject with the different landlords around
Okay.
town. As far as we know, there has only been one tenant applicant who is looking to even apply for PEP alongside of Project Restore, but we're wanting to get ahead of things as a potential alternative either way. We would anticipate that most landlords would be inclined to have that additional year of confirmed tenant lease. And most businesses would like to have an additional year's worth of rental funding under alternative B, for example. But alternative A would allow us to have a little bit more funds back into the city's coffers that we might want to put to other programs or for additional businesses for that matter.
I'm partial to alternative B as long as the second option is a 5-year required lease. So that's, I think that, you know, once a tenant gets to 4 years and they're reducing their rent, a lot of times they're you know, if they're still not used to paying the full rent, so they could end up leaving, or failing, actually. So in this, especially option one, this gives them, you know, it's a 50% reduction, then goes into full rent.
Right.
So I think that as a business, you know, to get used to that budgeting cycle is probably easier
Right, and-
for
Excuse
lack
me.
of failure.
And under alternative B, the option one that you're referring to, that is essentially 3 months of, 3 years of rental relief. So we would have them have a 5-year contract with that still. So the 3 out of 5 years for it. Currently, it is a 4-year lease for them, and they still get 2 years of rental relief. So 2 years covered, 2 years not covered.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, the alternative B is mine.
Do you guys agree with B?
I do. And they get to pick either option, right?
Yes, they get to choose either option, whatever
Yeah,
works best for them.
B.
The main question was whether you would prefer alternative A or alternative B. If we want to do what's best for the businesses or what might be best for the city to spread the funding to more applicants.
I'd like to, I think, to err on the side of probably the businesses in this particular incident.
You good with B?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I like your purple shirt.
Thank you.
Up next, we have the 2021 Land Management Code amendments for breweries, wineries, and distilleries.
Hi, Megan.
Hello. So just to provide an update on the land management code amendments for breweries, wineries, and distilleries, again, we're increasing the maximum square footage from 15,000 to 25,000 square feet permitted by special exception in CCMU and C zoning districts, and for industrial buildings built before October 1956 by special exception in CG, POM, IR, and IG. And then we'll continue to allow breweries by right at 15,000 square feet in CCMU and C, and then remove the prohibitions on outdoor speaker systems. So for Planning Commission, public hearing was on June 30th. We didn't receive any public input. And then for Mayor and Council, public hearing on August 24th, we also didn't receive any public input. We do have support from DCED. And then for next steps, we would just introduce the ordinance on September 28th and then approve the ordinance on October 26th.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next, we have the property acquisition at 441 South Potomac Street.
Hello.
Hi, Rodney.
I don't think Chief Lore could be here, so I'm just going to pinch hit a little bit for him. But we signed a sales agreement with NiSource to purchase land at this address a few months ago. And in that agreement, we had in there that we had time to do our own due diligence as to whether or not the site was contaminated or not. We hired Triad Engineering, a local company, to do some borings, and we got the reports back on September 2nd. And the site is contaminated.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. Lots of hydrocarbons, diesel fuel, things that are there from past uses that, while it could be remediated, it'd be very expensive, time-consuming, and they basically, Triad even recommended in the report that we look for another site. So that's what we're recommending to this body, that we terminate that agreement with NiSource, get our good faith money back, and tell the chief to keep looking.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, now that we know that is contaminated, I know it's not our problem because we don't own it, but it is our problem because it's in our city. So
Sure.
what happens now?
Well, this report has to go to MDE, so it becomes a public record, so that anybody who's interested in that land would know that. My guess is that the best use of it is a parking lot or just paving it over, and that's what they're gonna do with the majority of their site, because we knew some of their other lands were contaminated. We didn't know it extended this far out to Potomac Street. What they're gonna do is just pave them over and, just have it inaccessible, basically, the soil.
Ronnie, can you mention about the community garden also?
Right, some people ask about that. The community garden, when we put it there, we tested the soil there just to make sure that there was no issues, and it came back clean. Plus, the community garden is built up.
Right,
It's not that they're not gardening in the soil that was there, but regardless of that, the soil that was there was tested and it was clean. You know, these contaminations were found up the street and down, 6, 8, 10 feet. So we think the garden's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Operation Take Back.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to give the council an update on this initiative that we started back in August regarding looking at specific neighborhoods and trying to target those neighborhoods for some increased attention based upon the desires of the community. The goal of Operation Take Back was to partner with neighborhood residents in specific areas of the city to improve the safety, cleanliness, and livability of their neighbors, and for those that visit the area. We had a similar type effort, although on a smaller scale, pre-COVID, when we were getting concerns from the neighborhood regarding the Dale Street area in the West End. Several departments went out into that area and did a walking tour, found some things we could do to potentially decrease the amount of through traffic in that area, which was causing an issue with crime in that specific area. We found that by working with the residents on making alleys one-way or by putting barriers down to where you cannot create through traffic on an alley, that seemed to help while still allowing people to get to their backyard garages. That seemed to help significantly. And then also lighting. The light department was able to go out and evaluate the lighting, get more lighting, whether it be by adding lighting or increasing the wattage of the bulbs to make it brighter. And all in all, that really reduced the amount of issues that the community experienced out there. So in July, several of us were invited to a Neighborhoods First get-together from the Bester Community Neighborhoods First group. Council Member McIntyre, Council Member Brucci, Captain Langston, Lieutenant Lehman, myself, might have been one or two others there from the city. But we heard concerns from the community of this area, East Antietam Street, East Baltimore Street, South Locust, South Cannon, Hager, and King, that were extremely concerned about a lot of things in the area. The crime, the trash, the lighting, the loitering, the homeless issue. And we're looking, and not only were complaining about it, but they were trying to offer solutions. And obviously that made it more, a much more better dialogue is when we were, that community was actively trying to present some solutions that we could look at. So the next day, I got a meeting together with staff from these departments, HPD, HFD, water, wastewater, the light department, city engineering, public works, planning and code, community and economic development, and communications, and sat down and said, I think we can make a difference in this neighborhood, and I think we could do it without really adding much work to a staff that's already working extremely hard that it is now. And we should get out there and see what we can do for this neighborhood. They want to work with us. They were extremely motivated. They were extremely proud of their community, and I take a lot of that to heart, living very near that community. And we thought it was worth the effort to go out and do something. So we sat as a group and talked about the areas we wanted to focus in. And we also looked at the community survey that the mayor had commissioned and looking at the predominance of issues that were coming back on that survey, and they really kind of tied with the issues that the community had. That is crime and or questionable activities, blight, and parcel inventories, homeless assistance, trash remediation, street and alley lighting. Before I go much further, I want to thank especially Samantha Barrick of the Neighborhoods First group, who has really spearheaded this dialogue and this community involvement. And that truly is what is necessary, because we can't do this all in a vacuum of our own. We have to have the community's help and the community's input, and this group certainly provides it. So we sat, we thought that this would be a good way to tackle it, so we asked if Samantha would walk around the community with us. The mayor and I had walked that, just a little piece of that community, not too far in the recent past from then, and were aware of some of the issues, especially around the old Meredith property, Matthews Alley area, South Locust Street, or South Mulberry Street. And so we were a little bit aware of it. But what Samantha did was taking representatives of these departments, and in August, we walked this entire area. And as we did that, we started noticing some things. That if you really take the time to look around, and you see things that potentially you don't as you're just passing through. Keep going. There we go. So when it came to crime and questionable activities, the one area that the community was really wishing could happen was just to have more visibility, more police visibility. They weren't asking for necessarily somebody always there walking around, that kind of, even though they would certainly love that through a community resource officer type thing. And we would love to get to that point when we're able to staff up again. But just the sheer ability to have a police officer visible. So I asked the police department if that, during the course of a shift, if you had an officer who would normally go to the municipal stadium parking lot or Surrey School parking lot or another area and do their computer work and do their paperwork, if maybe just pull off on King Street or pull off on South Locust and sit there and do it. That will at least make you visible in the community, and trust me, they're gonna know you're sitting there. Because the amount of attention we attracted just in walking through the community ourselves was enough to say, you know, why are these people here? And people moved on, and that's what, that was ultimately what we wanted. They might not have been doing anything wrong, but by the same token, they might have thought about doing something wrong, and we kept them moving. And they've done that. And that was one thing that when we went back to the group in August, they had another meeting actually the next day. The police had already started to do that, and the community was very appreciative. There was not a lot of, the loitering had decreased. The activity around the sheets had decreased significantly because officers were pulling there on South Cannon and sitting there, and of course you don't want to, be doing your business with cops sitting 25 feet away. We also asked that potentially if they see folks on a porch, maybe get out and just say hello. And how's everything going, see what the neighbors say. There were some officers that were doing that, and that was very much appreciated. So that was where, that was the first kind of impression we wanted to make on that community, and I think it worked out really well. We were also looking again at alley diversion. On Bixler's Alley, which goes east-west, Matthews Alley goes north-south. Bixler's from Cannon all the way through, I think, to the A&E, or to the A&E parking deck. But we were focused mainly where Bixler's ends at Locust, and then Matthews from East Washington to Baltimore Street. We checked that alley out. That has significant through traffic, shortcuts for people to use. The police and the engineering group are looking at the adequate placement of barriers to keep that from being a throughway, while also allowing people that still utilize their garages in the back of their properties to be able to get to them. It just may now mean that instead of being able to get to it from South Locust, you have to go down South Mulberry to get to it, or, some other route. But you're gonna get stopped. And that will decrease that through traffic, which will also hopefully decrease the, convenience of being able to use those for things they shouldn't be used for. The next area was blight and parcel inventory. You all know how we've been working towards blight eradication, and this area is certainly no different. In doing the walk, though, not only were there the usual vacant buildings that were blighted, but we began noticing that there were owner-occupieds, owner-occupieds and other rental properties that were occupied that were just not in good shape. When we did some more research on some of those properties, we found that there were a lot of obstacles that were going to keep us from being able to do anything just because of the way the laws are. One of the things that I think has been a good idea for a long time was the ability to go and try to see what the status is of some of these properties and get into them. And I know that was brought before, and you're going to get a lot of ordinances brought to you or discussion brought to you in the next few weeks from PCAD that is going to try to crack down a little bit on some of these blight issues, not only for vacants, but also for occupied dwellings. And we identified a bunch of those as we walked around that day that were just, how could, people live there? One of the reasons why people live there is perhaps they can't afford to do anything with the property. So instead of just coming in with a hammer, we were looking at ways that we could fund the ability for a owner, this would be for an owner-occupied dwelling, to be able to get grant money up to a certain amount and be able to perhaps fix their roof, replace windows, fix their front porch. Maybe not any real additional improvement like build a deck or put a swimming pool in, but things that would actually improve the livability of the home. And in talking with that group, the Neighborhood's First group about that, they thought that was a really positive opportunity because that unfortunately, many of us aren't, we have things we want to improve on the house, mainly like a new roof, and they're not cheap. But to be able to give some money towards that to help those people out, that might spur the rest of the area to be able to use that money. So that is, we're working on that. We're going to look at potentially some ARPA money, if not some other money. We meet with Trone's office tomorrow to talk about our ARPA listing and other funding opportunities, and this is going to be one of those topics about how can we help the community with grant money. This would be grant money, not loans, to help them fix up their homes, not just in this community, but anywhere where it would be a need. We just identified places through walking around and doing this parcel inventory that could use the help. And then there's also the continued issue with the blight. We have a couple tax sale properties in this area that are a mess, and a couple residents we walked by that were vacant with doors wide open, that you could just walk into, and backyards full of trash. It's just not good for that neighborhood or any neighborhood. So those are also issues that we're going to tackle moving forward. Homeless assistance. One of the other issues that was brought to us in these neighborhood meetings was the fact that there is an increasing number of homeless that are finding their way to Hospital Hill because it is a very convenient place for them to locate. It's kind of out of the way, and the way it slopes, you can hide a little bit better and not be seen. And there was some concern about that. So it was important that as we walked around, the first thing we noticed was the fact that it was pretty trashy around that whole area that Meredith owned. It appeared that there had not been any maintenance done on the property except perhaps grass mowing for quite a while. So code enforcement contacted Meredith, and they pretty much immediately, Paul, I would say, came and took care of the situation. There was a lot of trash, a lot of stuff on the sidewalks that just were not, just made it a not real clean place. But Meredith took care of that. We also have significant concerns about the parking deck that's there. We hope that eventually they will do something with that parking deck. Even though it has a fence around it, it's not very secure. It's easily climbed over or cut through, and it obviously has been. If you look hard enough, you can find where there's drug activity going on in there. There are places where the concrete is breaking off, and it's just not a safe place. And we're hopeful that, Paul has identified that with them, and we're hopeful that they'll be able to take care of that as well, because they basically own that whole area all the way to East Washington Street. So, but they've been very accommodating, and we appreciate them working with us like that, as well as they are. Trash remediation, as I said, that was a major concern. We toured pretty much that entire neighborhood. There were some areas where it was not bad, where you can actually have a place to store your trash bins. The trash bins are set back. The streets are not in too bad a shape. Of course, there's going to be some trash on a street, but there are other places where it was just really, really bad, especially in the alleys. It was just awful. So we need to come up with ways, and we discussed about some ways, especially in those areas that are, in both owner and non-owner occupied dwellings, where we have to start making people accountable for keeping their units as clean as possible. It's not just the property owner if you're non-owner occupied, but the community is doing a very good job of trying to stress the fact that this is a community effort also. You all that have been out doing the trash collections in the neighborhoods and have gotten the community involvement, that's what this group is going to start doing, and probably have already started since we talked with them, to get out and keep their neighborhood clean. But it's a never-ending process, especially on the nights that we all know what it's like the nights after trash collection. They don't get every piece of trash in that truck, and a lot of it ends up on the street or on the sidewalk or in a front yard. So the community is very motivated to work with that. We've also looked at, potentially the placement of trash cans like we have in town in certain areas. They would like to not go that route immediately. They'd like to try to police us themselves using existing, residential trash bins. But we left that up as an opportunity for them if they thought it would work. The biggest concern in that area is the fact that there is just a limited amount of space for a lot of these folks to store their trash cans. Some of the places, especially on South Locust Street, you might have to walk, all the way behind units, down an alley, out in front of your house to have that bin picked up. We're not sure what we can do about that, except potentially offering them some other alternative. We don't know what that is. Alley pickup, we just don't know. But those are the ones where you're driving down Locust Street, or you're driving down South Potomac is another place where this can happen. The units are so close together, there's no walkway between. There's nowhere to put your trash can unless you go all the way around the block to put your trash can in the back. So that's something we still have to work on. Street and alley lighting, this was a kind of a bigger issue than what I thought it would be, but the light department was very responsive. They walked with us, and we went down alleys, especially behind Hager Street and down Matthews and Bixler's Alley, and looked at where we can improve the lighting or add lighting to not have it so dark. Because if it's dark, that's usually going to be places where bad things will happen. A lot of the neighborhood has cameras, and they point them out the back of their house because a lot of them park back there. They have off-street parking. and they're not able to catch when bad things happen because it's so dark. The light department is actively going through, and I think probably, Nathan, you've already taken care of a lot of that, as far as the wattage of the lighting to make it brighter back there, so it doesn't disturb the people that live there, shining in their, in their bedroom window or their living room window, but it does deter the loiterers and whatnot from hanging out back there because it's dark. So that's another thing we tried to do. So, one other area I didn't mention in there, and it's something we're gonna have to talk a lot about and probably have to get into the community as well, are alley garages. I guess back in the day, maybe Bob can remember this, back, back in the day, these garages served purposes.
Keep our horses there.
To keep your horses back in there. And, I think a lot of them, that's probably what they were built for. There's one right over here that's like that. But they don't serve a purpose now, and they become blighted, and they just become places that you can bust a door in and go in there and not do very good things. That's something that I know Kathy identified and Paul identified as we were walking in that area. What can we do with some of these alley properties, especially on the non-owner occupieds where there is no use for them. They're not even being used as storage or anything like that. So that's something we're going to continue to work on as we go through and do the parcel inventory, the housing inventory through there, and see what options we may have to either provide opportunities to fix the garages up and make them useful again, or to tear them down and make it green space, or a parking pad that they could actually use, in a productive way. We are going to continue this. We're looking at the Neighborhoods First program to have folks reach out. We will reach out to them. Our next community could potentially be the Locust Point area, Lee Street, Ray Street, Sycamore South, South Potomac, South Locust, that is in a very similar situation as South Mulberry, South Cannon, and try to do the same thing. Just be visible and do some of the things that are within our power, but that really don't cost a lot of money. Light bulbs may cost a little bit, but we're not breaking the bank on increasing the amount of lighting in some of these dark alleys, and to make it, people feel safe when they're walking their dogs. And, like the survey said, try to be a little bit cleaner on the trash side. Feel safer in your neighborhood. Have more visibility of public safety in the area. And I think we can do a lot of that in the staffing challenges that we're having now without really relying too much more on staff to do. I mean, just sitting there and being visible is a huge improvement in some of these communities, because they know they got eyes out there. We'd also look potentially for additional mobile cameras that we could place in particular areas where there might be an increase in bad things happening. That we could also look at ARPA money for capital projects to utilize there. So we intend to attend the September meeting of the Bester Community Neighborhoods First Group, check in with them again and see, how are we doing? How are they doing? Are we making a difference? What can we do to change that? What can we do in addition to to let them know what we are doing to try to address some of their concerns, because they have a very invested community in that area, and it was very heartening to see the enthusiasm and how much they enjoyed living in that neighborhood. They just want to be safe, and they want to have a good quality of life, and I think those are the things we can help them with. So, any questions you have for us? I've got everybody here, so if you have any specific questions, fire away.
I just want to thank you for your commitment to improving neighborhood by neighborhood. So I think it's fantastic. And I agree that, you know, the Bester neighborhood is definitely engaged and wants it, you know, to improve, as do other neighborhoods throughout the city. So thank you to staff, and thank you for putting something like this together to concentrate. So I appreciate it.
Good enough? Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Lastly, we have state law and city electrical licenses. Paul Falk.
Okay, so one of those types of things where the state passes a law which affects our local laws. The state passed back on May 30th, and then it became effective on July 1, that we can no longer call electrical licenses that we issue here licenses. We have to call them registrations. So basically, it's semantics. It's the same thing as our plumbing registration that we have. There is no difference in it other than we can't call it a license anymore. Just to let you know, we currently license 327 electricians. And to get a license, which will turn into a registration, is that you have to have a state of Maryland license. Washington County used to be a way that you could obtain a license with the city, but they are no longer doing their licensing program. They're only accepting state licenses as well. So it's just kind of going along with everyone else. Nothing's really changing on that level. And just for your knowledge, what does it have to affect our electricians? There's only really 15 currently licensed electricians that do not have a state license as well. So they'll have to work through that and get their state license. To let you know how they can do that, the local electrical board, Washington County, is supposed to be letting these electricians know. They have until July 1 of 2022 to basically do an exam waiver that they can get a state license. So basically, they just tell them, I license locally, I want to like to get a state license, and then that makes them compliant. So they have essentially a year to do that. So they have some time for that. The one thing that the state law did as well is that it gave the local authority the ability to license journeyman and apprentice for electricians. That's something that we do with the plumbers as well. And it also made the requirement that a journeyman or a master has to be on a job site for doing work. Right now, the master electrician does not have to be on a job site. They can pull a permit and just throw anyone out there to do the work. It doesn't have to actually be the license holder. Now it's requiring that the license holder, either master or journeyman, be on the job site performing the electrical work. That should help us a lot with inspections because the person that is licensed, that's taken exams and done all that stuff is on the job doing the work. So that should help us a lot. But as far as that, that's pretty much it. It's just pretty much we got to update the code, so it would be an ordinance change. I can't guarantee it would be to the this month. It would most likely be in October. We're working with our attorney's office on getting all the semantics worked out with the state law. So,
Any question?
Thank you, State of Maryland.
yeah, I know.
Thank
Cool.
you. City
Cool stuff.
Administrator.
Mayor, just one thing, it's City Park Fall Fest this weekend, Saturday, 11 to 3, all-day activities, and a movie that evening, I think it's Shrek, at City Park Band Shell. So it's always a fun time to bring your kids down and experience City Park.
Thank you. Shelley?
I just want to say that I had a local business reach out to me because they were concerned about safety around their property, and they were actually losing employees because the employees felt unsafe. And that's obviously a huge concern. No one should feel unsafe in their home nor going into their businesses. So I reached out to Chief Kiefer, and the chief scheduled a very quick meeting with, the business owner. He brought Captain Langston and Lieutenant Fetchu, and all of the employees came in and they sat and listened to their concerns, and the employees were heard and I think felt better at the end of it. The chief is going to arrange, he actually walked around the perimeter of the building to see if there was any other types of ways that they could increase their safety, and they're going to have the experts come back and actually do an even better job at like improvements that can be made in order for them to feel safe. So my point in saying this is two things. Number one, thank you very, very much. I think that it really helped the business and helped the owners feel like someone was listening. And I also want to encourage, if that does happen in anyone's building, in, an office or whatever, that HPD is willing to come and listen and hear the concerns. And I think that that is a very unique situation to be able to have our officers be in there and listen and make the employees feel safe. So thank you again. That's it.
Bob? Kristen?
Yes. So first, I'd like to welcome Nathan's Ridge, which is a sober men's living house. They ribbon cut it 2 weeks ago, and they now have 5 men. It is a 12 to 15 bed. It's right up on Potomac Street, and they have 2 coming in. And it's a transitional house with programming. And so they'll be getting nutrition, there's Bible study, just a whole bunch of great things. So just welcome to Hagerstown. Also, the best thing that I've seen in the community the last couple of weeks is what Goodwill does at 8 a.m. And so just shout out to the Goodwill staff and their board, giving out hot breakfasts on Jonathan. And then I see them come down and deliver it, anything that they have left. And resources out there, the health department. I've dropped my daughter off 2 times this week, and I've never been back there to see what they do that early. And it is amazing. It's amazing to see that partnership right there. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. So a couple things, because it's been a couple weeks since we met. One, I just wanted to thank everyone who came to the Washington Goes Purple kickoff at City Park on September 3rd. It was a really, really good night. Also like to thank Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, who visited last week to talk about opioid and drug problems in our community in Washington County and the state as a whole, and what the state is doing to address those issues moving forward. And I'd also like to thank Congressman Trone, who was here last Friday. He met with me and city staff about the $500,000 in money he got to remove blight in our community, which is going to be great for us since that's been one of our initiatives we're focused on. And then at 3:30, he joined Washington Goes Purple volunteers, the Hagerstown Police Department, and the Hagerstown Fire Department to do a drug take-back in the West End, which was pretty cool, watching our congressman knock on doors and asking for unused or unwanted medication, which we got a lot of, so that's a success, and I appreciate him taking his time out of the day to walk around Hagerstown and see what we're up to. Also, just to piggyback on the Operation Take Back we've been working on, we've also been meeting with the Homeless Outreach Committee every 2 weeks, which I think I've talked about briefly. But it's nice to watch the Homeless Coalition and the Health Department and city staff kind of putting our heads together to figure out how we can solve some of the issues that we're facing. Obviously, we all live here. We get emails and calls and texts all the time asking what we're going to do to help the people that we're seeing all around our town. And just know that there are organizations, pretty much every organization, coming together right now to stop operating in silos and figure out how to solve this. So we're going to get through it, and we're working very hard, just like we are neighborhood by neighborhood, to help make Hagerstown a better place to live and work. And lastly, I just wanted the or City Park Fall Fest is this weekend, also the Bester Day of Hope on that same day, and we have 2 ribbon cuttings at noon at City Park for the new trails, so I hope to see everyone there. And with that, we're adjourned.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined by Planning and Code Administration Department Director Kathy Marr. Kathy, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
A few items on the agenda that related to your department today. I think the first one, just sort of wrapping up a little bit of business on that initial item having to do with land management code and the distilleries. Can you just give us a synopsis of that and what was decided, what will be voted on coming up at the regular session?
Sure, absolutely. Last year, we developed a proposal to allow for small-scale breweries, wineries, and distilleries in certain areas of the city, and set a cap for how big we thought that could be, because we were just starting out with the idea, and focusing on the downtown area, as well as for older industrial buildings near the downtown that might be suitable for adaptation. And so that got adopted in June. The economic development staff have been promoting this use to potential breweries and have found that maybe the language is a little too tight. And so what's being proposed at the request of the economic development staff is to increase the minimum, or the maximum. Right now, it's set at a maximum of 15,000 square feet for the space occupied by the enterprise in the building. And so the desire is to increase that to 25,000 square feet to get more flexibility for enterprises that have been looking at our buildings. And so it would still be allowed by, as proposed, allowed by right at 15,000 square feet in the downtown in our conversion district, which is something you can do overlay on old buildings that are non-conforming around the city. And then also as a special exception, 25,000 square feet. So you would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals if you wanted to be bigger than 15,000 square feet, all the way up to 25 for the downtown in that conversion district. And then for the 4 districts where we were allowing the 15,000 square foot with the Board of Zoning Appeals, that's gonna still go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but the increase is going up to 25,000. And then the other change was to remove the prohibition on the outdoor speakers. This is the only use in the land management code where we prohibit outdoor speakers. Everybody else might wanna have speakers, and it's only regulated by the city noise ordinance. And so the feeling was, why be so restrictive on that use, and just let it be regulated by the noise ordinance?
Yeah, it certainly makes sense. Now, is this something that was precipitated by requests or just anticipating that this is something that will?
We had a couple of prospects look at buildings, and they wanted to be larger than 15,000 square feet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so we've had the public hearing with the mayor and council, and so tonight was just to let them know we have not received any further input. In fact, we had no input at the hearing, and nobody sent anything in the 10 days after. And so the next step is at the end of this month to introduce the ordinance, the end of next month, approve the ordinance, and then it would become effective 30 days later.
Wow, okay. The next item that I wanted to touch on, certainly your department branches out in a lot of different directions. And one of the things I think the item certainly that the most time was spent on during the meeting was Operation Takeback as presented by the city administrator. And certainly the Planning and Code Administration Department will have some role in that. I know you were out there as part of the
Yes.
tour and some of your staff too. Is there anything that you can share at this point that you might be able to do from the standpoint of your department to help in that overall process?
Well, after the walking tour, things that were identified that were related to our department, our staff immediately got on, like there were a couple of unsecured buildings while we were there. And we observed some, debris kind of issues in some, because we walked up and down a couple of alleys as well as the street. It was a good hot day for that kind of activity too.
It was.
And so they got on those issues. And then next week, they're gonna be coming before the mayor and council to talk about doing proactive community enhancement inspections to every property in this targeted area. Right now, we do proactive exterior inspections of registered properties, the registered rental properties, the registered vacant properties. We don't do the proactive community enhancement inspections of owner-occupied properties. So we want to bring that to the mayor and council to let them know that this is what we're planning, which is not what we typically do, is to go property by property in this area, as the city administrator would like us to do, to see what the shape the buildings are in, and if there's issues, reach out to the homeowners and say, these are the standards that we abide by in the city for property maintenance. These are the issues we observe that you need to take care of, give them a chance to look into it. Also, as my staff urged us to approach the city administrator by, we need to do something about a funding program for the owner occupants, because right now, We have a grant program for landlords for rental properties. And if you are below a certain income level, you could get a loan through the Community Development Block Grant Program. But we don't have any grants for homeowners to fix up problems with their properties. And so the city administrator thought that was a good idea. We'll try to figure out how to make some money available for that. Because undoubtedly, when we reach out to homeowners, they don't have income coming in because they're not rental properties. They're gonna say, I'm on a fixed income. How am I supposed to address these issues? And so hopefully we'll be able to have a pot of money, could say, well, go and speak with the Department of Community Economic Development and see if you can't get a grant to help with this.
Yeah, I think any homeowner can relate to that to some degree because there's always something that can be done
Yeah,
to your home or needs to be done to your home, and oftentimes you wind up putting it off because you don't have that money. And it seems like this would really make a whole lot of sense, given that this is a city where so many people rent. So to do something for homeowners ultimately, and I guess my other question would be, how much flexibility would be given to a homeowner if you go in and you find that there is a potential issue? Would there be more flexibility given, or would the guidelines be similar to what you would do with
but
rental
the
properties?
guidelines are the guidelines. It's more a matter of working
Okay.
with them on the timing of getting things fixed up.
Okay, gotcha.
Because in this case, they're affecting themselves. They're not affecting a tenant.
Right.
And so we work with them on the timing, but at the same time, we want to get the outsides fixed up because the outside's appearance affects everybody around them, it affects the property values, affects quality of life. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's a
and-
matter of working with folks.
Right, and that's the first thing you see. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, if you walk around any neighborhood, the first things that come to mind are certainly the things that you see and that you observe. And I think that was part of the frustration, to some degree, on that tour, was seeing some of these properties that are very dilapidated or have issues, yet there are loopholes seemingly for some of these people who own or at least are inhabiting those properties, and the city's hands are really tied to be able to do anything with
Yeah.
the appearance of those particular
There's
properties.
several properties that we're aware of in the city where the person who's officially on the deed is dead. And no solution has been maybe it's a divided estate, they can't find the next of kin, whatever. So you've got a property you can't really enforce a property to a dead person.
Right,
And so you're kind of in limbo. And so in some cases, there may be a family member living in that house and paying the taxes so it doesn't go to tax sale, but they are not the owner, and so therefore we can't go to them and say, you've got, because one of the properties we saw on the tour, the windows are broken out, but people were living in there,
Yeah.
but they're not the owner because the owner's dead. You're like, well, how do you enforce that? Because it's the owner who is ultimately responsible for the condition of a property, but there's no owner.
yeah, and those folks who are there are satisfying the bare minimum requirements to the point where there's nothing that can be done from an enforcement standpoint, because like you said, who do you go after?
Yeah, 'cause
Someone
the
who's no longer here.
The tools that we have is you, eventually, if you can't get compliance from the owner, you go to court. You can't take a dead person to court.
Yeah,
So this is something that we've talked about, maybe you should bring up with the legislature. There needs to be a way to help that process along, because there's another one on Snyder Avenue where there was a fire, and that is all, and so the property has been sitting in a deplorable condition for a while, but again, there's no owner. There's a lot of family members trying to figure out whose responsibility it is to be the owner.
yeah.
And meanwhile, the neighborhood has to put up with the house in that condition.
Yeah, an extremely frustrating
Yes.
situation for many people involved, without question. And the other item was trade licenses, specifically having to do with electricians. Can you just sort of recap that? Because we go from the city being able to extend licenses to electricians now to only being able to give them what would be termed registrations as opposed to licenses. So what truly is the change here, if you can kind of just break it down in layman's terms?
The state just made the change, and I don't know if there was really any notification to anybody that it was coming down the pike.
So you had
But
no
in-
idea either?
No. So in May, they made the change. Previously, electricians could be licensed by the state, or they could be licensed locally, like by the county. And then we also piggybacked on the county and licensed them at the city. And the change said they can no longer be licensed at a local level, they can only be licensed at the state level. And so some electricians don't have a state license, they just have a local license. So they're gonna need to get with the state by next July to get a state license. They can continue until then. But the folks who currently don't have a license because it expired or whatever, they need to get with the state now. Because as of July 1, they need to be licensed by the state because they don't have any kind of license.
How does this benefit people in the city from the standpoint of ensuring that they are safe? Does this help ramp that up to some degree?
Well, one of the changes they made that just seems logical to me is that they are now making it so that the electricians are subject to similar licensing requirements as plumbers. So for a plumber, if you're having plumbing work done, it's a licensed plumber, and the person doing the work at the site or overseeing the work at the site is a licensed plumber. That was not the same requirement for electricians, so they've now made the change that in order for you to hire someone to do electrical work, they must be licensed by the state. And then while that work is being done on your property, either a master or a journeyman licensed by the state must be on site, either doing the work or overseeing the work. So, I mean, that should give a lot of comfort to homeowners to know that if they hire someone, you know that it's being either done or directly overseen by a licensed electrician, because electricity is nothing to fool around with.
Yeah, how odd a differentiation was that to sort of draw it up one way for plumbers and a different way for electricians?
All I can assume is that there were different lobbying groups with different levels of success at the state. I don't
Evidently.
know what happened this year that now they're cracking down to make electricians and plumbers more of an even playing field. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, just seems like a common sense way of
Yeah.
doing things.
So what we need to do is change our code, because we are no longer allowed to license, but we are allowed to register. It's just semantics. So we're gonna change it to a registration, because we have been licensing electricians since 1970.
Wow.
And so this is, it just.
51 years.
Yeah, so it's just a way, another layer for our taxpayers to be ensured that the people who are coming for permits, they are properly licensed. So we would check to be sure when we register that they've been licensed by the state.
Wow. Yeah, just seems like a step that probably should have been taken a long time ago, but hey, gotten around to it now and,
Yeah,
you
just
know,
a scramble for the local electricians to come into compliance.
yeah,
Because
that's,
I don't know if they've had much notice of it either, or an awareness that it's happened.
right.
Supposedly, as Paul mentioned, there's some kind of board that's gonna be reaching out to the electricians to let them know.
Well, get everybody on the same page there with that. Kathy, thanks for your time
Absolutely.
this evening. Certainly appreciate it. For Kathy Marr, I'm Wes Decker. That will do it. That will wrap it up for Council Wrap. We'll see you next time on the city's cable channel and on our social media platforms. Thanks for watching.